Good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Fortin. I am a managing partner at a fintech called iCapital. We specialize in providing technologies that make the investing for high net worth individuals into alternative products easier. So you are now stuck with the fourth engineer in a row. I'm an electrical engineer by trade, but I have been at the front row of financial technology for over 35 years. I spent the 90s in a global sell-side financial technology firm called Wall Street Systems. We weren't even called fintechs back then. And then I spent 16 years at BlackRock running the Aladdin platform, which is currently the global standard for asset management, risk management, and processing. I joined iCapital about 6 years ago to go back to my entrepreneurial roots. Through my experience on the sell side, the buy side, and now in alternatives financial technology, I've had a fantastic view into what has happened in financial technology over the last few years. So I'm going to start with just 5 slides. First is the fact that technology really has, for the last 20 years, has been absolutely unavoidable in every industry, but none more so than financial services. In fact, I'll tell you, I believe desktop technology and software has been critical for financial services for 35 years. Starting way back in the late 80s with Bloomberg on the desktops at Merrill Lynch and all of the desktop software that came out during that period of time, it has been the perfect marriage between needs and abilities between technology and financial services, starting with decimalization, the Big Bang in the UK, individual investing. Without technology, none of that would have been possible because the volumes and the complexity has just grown exponentially as each one of those regulatory changes has happened. But what's happened over that period of time has been fascinating from my seat. But today, if you are anywhere in any industry, whether it's in trucking and construction or financial services and everything in between, technology is absolutely critical in every department. Used to be with just accounting, then it went to operations, it's marketing, it's corporate finance, it's everywhere. And we all know that because we live it, and many times we don't even realize it. So I'm going to talk about financial technology, the opportunities for asset managers, in 4 simple slides. The first one is that asset managers, and really all financial services, are burdened by their legacy technology, their infrastructure and their systems. Much of that software that was written 30 years ago, by the way, is still being used. There is a term called legacy systems. A legacy system is not an old system. It's just a system that everyone's afraid to touch because the people who built it have retired at least 10 years ago. And that is the burden of financial services. And that is one of the reasons why you've seen so much happening across financial tech and fintech companies. Most of the technology investment made by the large asset managers and financial services providers over the last 15 years has really been in response to the global financial crisis. It has been driven by the regulators and the auditors because they all had individual systems isolated from another. And the regulators came in and said, you can't continue to operate like that. You can't have a trading system separate from your risk management system, separate from your client system, and you can't have one in London and one in New York and one in Hong Kong, and they don't talk to each other. You need a global perspective on your business. And that has caused 15 years of investments in many of these firms because they're all were legacy systems, or they may have been new, but taking a new system and plugging it into a 40-year-old system is very, very hard. So much of the investment has been driven through risk management, compliance, audit, regulations, and has caused these firms to, in many ways, take their eye off the ball. And that's where the fintechs have come in. They have really filled in the gap on client experience and made significant inroads into the core businesses of these financial services companies, and not only lost clients, but lost revenue. Now, the fintechs, and this is where the regulators are not going to like this, the fintechs have been riding regulatory arbitrage for 15 years. What do I call it? Why do I call that? Many cases, if you're a small fintech, to go in, particularly in much of the banking world, you are making riskier assessments of what you can do and not do because you're making a bet that the regulators aren't going to note. Like a Bank of America, you have zero tolerance for upsetting your regulator. So you're going to go by the letter of the law, whether it's on AML, KYC, payments, compliance, whatever. If you're a startup, you're able to cut the corners a little bit to gain clients. It's just the way it is. Now, there's another arbitrage going on as well with fintechs, and that they get to use the pipes that all the banks have built for free because they didn't have to build it. They're just riding it. It's much like the telecom companies did, and the new telecom companies coming in and using the wires and the pipes built by the existing telecom firms over time. That has been one of the benefits. But really, the fintechs have taken the place of many of the client experience elements in financial services because most of the banks and the asset managers, as they built technology, built it mostly for themselves, make their lives easier. So when you logged onto your banking site, was it a good experience? In many cases, it wasn't. Clients expected an Amazon-like experience, not a banking experience. So they were able to take an Amazon-like experience that everyone expects because, let's face it, the competition for user experience isn't another banking site. It's Amazon. That's what people expect when they go into transact. And the fintechs have made huge inroads on payments, on investing, on lending, on doing the things that are, in many cases, most profitable for banks and leaving the banks with some of the least profitable stuff by going around the banks. Now, in the world of fintech, there are really two types of fintechs. There are the disruptors that come into an ecosystem and ultimately somebody's losing money, usually it's the banks. And then there are enablers. They're the ones that actually help the entire ecosystem, everyone participating win. And those two tend to play out in very, very different ways, particularly if you're going direct to consumer versus doing a B2B. But the fintechs have really jumped in and made the banks pay attention. One of the last things that was said in the last session that is also quite relevant is why aren't the banks being more active in this? Well, they are, but they'll never be the leaders because fintechs start out with small investments. They're investments by outside investment firms. The banks look at, let's start something new as an expense. It's small. It'll take time to get traction, and nobody in these large organizations has the patience to wait 2-3 years for traction because it's always an expense. That's why fintechs come in, they pave the road, and then the big banks pay attention. It's like, oh, we need to do that. And then they start jumping on the bandwagon. Third, there is hope for asset managers, and new technologies really provide that hope. So when I say new technologies for banks, it's like what's happened in the last 7-8 years. Clearly, robotic process automation is hugely valuable for banks. There's still a lot of things done on paper in banks, believe it or not. And robotic process automation through companies like UiPath or Blue Prism provide great automation and scale for the financial institutions. Data science, another critical item. If you're not in data science in a financial institution, you're nowhere. Analyzing your client trends, analyzing your own internal processes is super important for making sure that you can keep up with what your competitors are doing on the leading edge. Data warehousing, some of the new data warehousing technologies, particularly something like Snowflake, has been great at connecting firms and getting them out of sending data files back and forth. Fourth, blockchain, and I'm not talking about crypto, I am talking about blockchain. The underlying technologies have a tremendous opportunity of connecting financial firms in a consistent way without sending data files or paper back and forth that can provide great transparency and efficiencies in the industry. At iCapital, we're really looking at doing this in alternatives, which has zero automation outside of what's happened in the last few years. And then finally, what we've all seen in the press with ChatGPT and programming with Copilot and the such on GitHub, these are new technologies that are going to dramatically increase the throughput in your technology departments. But these types of technologies build on top of what all these banks have to end up doing on a day-to-day basis, which keeping their business going. So finally, my last slide, it still remains to be seen, though, if they've learned the lessons from the past, these asset managers and financial services. Building a cohesive end-to-end client experience takes process. It takes understanding the process, because nothing happens in isolation. It takes understanding your data, which is populated in multiple locations. Bad data is like a cancer in every organization. It kills you if you can't get control of it. And then finally, focusing on not just your own people, but what your end client wants. The opportunities that technology is providing, the new technologies, can help the banks level the playing field, but technology by itself isn't the solution. It's about bringing the process, the data, and the people you're building that technology for as part of the overall solution, or they'll just end up building isolated systems again and ending back where they were in the 2000s. And I'm happy to take questions. Any questions? One question. Okay. Yes.
Great presentation. I just wondered, in terms of the clients that you're working with, you're seeing, who are leading the charge in terms of technology adoption?
That is a great question. I am seeing we deal mostly with alternative asset managers, and we are seeing those that recognize what their core strengths are in technology and where they need to go outside the shop. Some of the biggest organizations have a not invented here syndrome, which is another one of the big hurdles to adopting financial technology externally. Those that have gotten over that, where they're used to they're open to bringing in something new that's not their core technology, have been the fastest moving organizations. Those that have said, I have to build everything myself, or if you do it, you have to customize it to be exactly what I want. Those are the ones that are moving more slowly. But we are seeing, particularly the largest asset managers, open up the doors that were historically closed, and being able to fly by their competitors. Okay, thank you.